It feels like it's a privilege to be working in these areas, to be working for places that do so much for like conservation and giving back in that regard. And that's, I think, important, and it makes it easy to justify.
Did you know the average person will work 90,000 hours in their lifetime? What if you could use those hours to find fulfillment and become a disruptor for good? Welcome to the Work That's Worth It podcast. I'm Georgie Enthoven, and I'm here to demonstrate that an ambitious, meaningful, and rewarding career is not just a dream, it's achievable. Each episode will dive into conversations with global change makers who cracked the code on combining income and impact. If you've ever felt like you were torn between a paycheck and your purpose, or maybe you simply yearn for more purpose, you're going to be exposed to the ambitious humans who have done it themselves. Ready to make your work worth it? Let's get started. Today's episode is about pivoting, and in this case, a brave, full 180-degree successful pivot. But it's also about planting a seed and sharing with you that there are people out there who find their day-to-day work a privilege. What surprises me in the work that I do is that it's not hard to find the extraordinary people that I interview on the podcast. And I don't seek out people beforehand who use phrases such as, "it's a privilege to do the kind of work I do." But I look for people who are interested in making a meaningful contribution with their 90,000 career hours. And from this group, it just comes out naturally. Here's a question to ponder before we get into the interview. How can you surround yourself with more people who feel excited and inspired by their work? Today's interview is with Matt Foulsham, who is currently a head game ranger at a company called &Beyond, which pairs luxury travel experiences with conservation efforts. As you will hear in my conversation with Matt, is that his studies took him in a direction that was admirable, but not inspiring for him. Many young professionals that I meet are dealing with the discomfort of, I know I should be grateful for this career path and job, but something feels not quite right. But to change things up for more alignment is hard, especially when your job is good or okay and not bad. If you hate your job, then it's obvious and change will happen. But often the knowing needed to make a change that's more subtle requires introspection. Matt, who you'll meet shortly, is obviously someone who can learn fast and isn't afraid of a challenge. But also, you will hear that he built in a well-thought-out plan to make his move, which gave him confidence to take a bold step in the opposite direction of his degree. Also, notice how some of the durable skills he learnt in mechanical engineering translated to his work in the wilderness. Matt, great to have you on the Work That's Worth It podcast.
Very nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So you're sitting in South Africa, and I was hoping to jump into a pretty interesting turning point for you, which was when you are sitting in the UK as a South African, having studied mechanical engineering, and you have probably gotten to a job that is hard to achieve, and you realize this is not where I should be.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting time for me. I think it was for everyone. It was actually during COVID that this all sort of happened. And I was sat in the office in the UK, rain was pouring down, it was grey. And we were going through those periods where it was furlough, so people were not at work. And I was sitting and just wondering, what I really wanted to do. And I'd always craved the adventure of life and wanting to do something outdoors and just something active, and something in the sunshine was also a big part of it. And I'd grown up, obviously, in South Africa, going to the Kruger National Park, going on sort of more like self-drive safaris, and had never experienced a proper sort of guided safari. And I just was in love with nature and being outdoors. And we had just recently actually been on a holiday back to South Africa. I'd taken some friends out from the UK back here to South Africa and did the Kruger National Park. And it was one of those friends that actually turned to me on one of these trips and said to me, "Why don't you do this full time?" And it was sort of that conversation that rang in my head when I was sitting at home, locked up due to COVID. And I started doing research into it and made the big shift, I guess. Yeah, wanted to just come out here and spend some time in nature, and so made the jump.
It's amazing that when somebody has what could seem meaningless conversation lands and it opens up a portal of something completely different. It sounds like that question that he asked you sat with you and really changed the trajectory of your working life.
It's amazing that, as you say, like that one question, it just sparks this whole stream in your head of, why don't I do this full time? And that's just that little spark is all that it took really to get me to commit to it.
Yeah. So walk us through your decision-making process. Like, did you make a pros and cons list, or was it gut driven, or how did you actually decide to back off the engineering career you had and actually take a leap?
To be honest, I think it was very much gut driven. From speaking to friends and family, you always go through and get second opinions on everything. And another thing that sort of stuck with me is just people sort of saying, you're young enough to make these decisions. You can go off on a totally different path. And if it means that you end up coming back towards engineering, so be it. But you've got the opportunity, you've got the means. Why not just give it a go? And so it was very much a sort of gut-driven decision from that perspective, I guess.
Yeah. I love that you say that, because I always, when young people say, what should be like the real focus in my 20s for work, I usually think it's experiment to see what sticks and what really lights you up. And there's a window where you can experiment, where you have way less responsibility. And it sounds like your family members and friends like really encouraged you to do just that.
Absolutely. And I think it comes down, it's that perfect storm of, at the time, being single, working in an industry that I did enjoy, but working in a country that I wasn't super happy with in terms of just the quality of life that I was getting, and COVID striking and everything. And it just all lined up for me to just say, no, let's give this thing a go. The intention originally actually was to come over, do the training, because it was quite a long training course that I was doing. It was going to be a year-long course, to do that training course and then reassess. And that reassessment never happened. It just flowed. I was just so happy here, and that was it.
Yeah. I love that you said that as well, because I think often our fear prevents us taking that first step. And 1 year in the grand scheme of things, I always say you have 90,000 hours in your career, and 1 year is a small portion of that. So if you can take that first step, and I love that you gave yourself permission to reevaluate after you did the training. But in your particular case, I guess the shoe fit.
Exactly. I just genuinely, Georgia, I couldn't be happier with the decision I make. Just in terms of with my quality of life, the style of life I lead, I don't look back at all and say, no, I think maybe one day I'll go back to engineering. This is what I do now, and I love it.
Yeah. How long did it take? So from thinking, I want to do this, to actually leaving the UK and signing up for your course?
So I think it was probably around 3 months in total, from starting the process of getting vetted to be on this course, to enrolling, and then to selling and packing up my life in the UK, because I got rid of everything. There wasn't, anything left behind. And it was 3 months. And then I came down to South Africa. It was the January of 2020 that I came down, and that was it. I was committed then.
And your colleagues in the UK, when you told them your plan, how did that go?
It was actually funny, because I went into the CEO of the company that I worked for and had a chat with him when I resigned. And he actually laughed in the discussion that I had, and he said, "You won't come back." He had been on Safari before, and he knew obviously the grip that Safari has on people, and he said, "You won't come back."
Yeah. From everything you've told me so far, there was nobody in your life saying, "Don't do it, you're giving up too much."
No, not at all. My friends, family, everyone was super supportive. And I think that helps. It would have been a lot more difficult if you've got those little whispers in your head saying, maybe this isn't worth it. But absolutely everyone that I spoke to was super behind me and backed me all the way.
Yeah. So you go through this course, and How do you reconcile your identity as an engineer and then becoming a safari guide? Was that from going one to the other, or did it feel like you were just coming home into who you should have been all along?
Yeah, I think a little bit of just coming back to who I am and what I wanted. I don't think there's much thought process in terms of it. For me, it wasn't a change in who I was. It was just the natural progression towards what I was always going to be. There wasn't a switch that I had to make. It was just, this was the natural progression that had to happen.
Yeah. Were there skills that you were able to take from your job into being a safari guide?
A little bit, yes. So it helped being a mechanical engineer. Obviously, we're out in the African savannah, driving around in vehicles that do break sometimes. So it does help having a little bit of that mechanical knowledge. The biggest thing for me is not so much just initially as a safari guide, but moving up through the system, becoming a head ranger here at the lodge meant that there's a lot of managerial skills that I could bring through from my old job. And then also it's that problem solving aspect. That's what engineering was for me. And that's why I enjoy engineering and still do, is there's a problem, how are we going to fix it? What's the solution? And I think that does help a lot.
Yeah, I imagine in your new role, and I've actually experienced this personally, but your people skills and ability to relate to all different kinds of people is super important part of what you do, not just internally with the guides that you manage, but also the types of people who come to an eco resort. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that and how that was for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely previous work did help with that. We find that with the safari industry, especially at some of these luxury eco lodges, there are sort of very successful guests that come along. And I think my previous corporate life does help me in being able to relate to them and get on a more sort of easy to talk to basis with them. The other thing for me, and this is just, I guess, some more of my history, but I actually left South Africa when I was 11 years old and moved out to the United Arab Emirates. Grew up out there, went to an international school out there. And so that exposure to different cultures and different people, I think massively helped to lay the groundwork for being able to just be able to talk to anyone and help with those people skills that you mentioned there.
Yeah, it's so interesting that the journey that we take on life is like you pick up all these skills well out of the classroom, but it's the kind of things that you end up then using and help you become successful in the roles that you take later on.
No, absolutely. And I think with this job, as you say, it is a people-based job more than actually it is about the animals and the nature. And yeah, those softer skills are where it makes or breaks a really good safari guide, I think.
Yeah. What aspects turned out to be even better than you would have imagined in this new role?
So I suppose for me, it's because you can't really imagine it beforehand, but the actual lifestyle that a safari guide leads is quite a unique one. I like refer to it with guests as it's an alternative lifestyle. We're up really early in the morning. We work long days. We work 6 weeks on and then get our 2 weeks off. It's a great job, and it is kind of one of those dream jobs that I think everyone romanticizes, but it's not necessarily for everyone. And I don't think you know unless you've given it a go and tried it. And in terms of what surprised me, that is something that I've really enjoyed actually is that work lifestyle. And being at a lodge in the middle of the bush means that you are a little bit isolated, and the people you work with become your friends and family that you live with as well. And that was obviously a little bit different to what you'd imagine it to be. And I really enjoy that side of things. Yeah.
Also, I'm imagining experiencing Africa or Southern Africa through the eyes of people who have never been there before and showing them part of that beauty must be a very rewarding part of what you do.
Honestly, probably the best part of the job, because I get to share the joy and love that I have for this environment with other people, and especially for like their first time coming to experience it. You feed off the energy of the people that you're with, right? And that energy is always fantastic on a game drive vehicle, because a lot of these people, it's the first time that they're spending out in proper wilderness for a lot of these guests, and seeing these amazing creatures out in the wild, and just the awe and wonder that they're experiencing, you kind of get to feed off of that a little bit and get to rehash it every single game drive, basically.
Yeah, that's incredible. I wonder if there are parts of the work that you do that you romanticized. I think when I wrote my book, I interviewed somebody who had been at Patagonia, one of the early employees, and he said, you've got to love what you do because 90% of it is chores. So to really love what you do gets you through all that, but no work comes without some of the grittier parts. Can you share a little bit about what's different from the romanticized idea of being a guide on safaris?
Well, I suppose for everyone, they see the Instagram side of safari, right? It's going out, seeing these incredible animals out in the wild. And that really is a fantastic part of it and the best part of it. But it is still a job like any other. I come back from game drive every morning and it's sitting on the computer, it's emails, it's reports, it's finance, it's all that kind of stuff. So it is a job like any other. And that part of it, no one really sees. And so that's just a part, as you said there, it's just something you've got to get over. And being able to do those things is actually a privilege to allow me to then go out and spend my morning or my afternoon out in the wilderness.
Yeah, that's such an amazing way to phrase it, as a privilege. And I think so few people can actually say that about their work, that it feels like a privilege to be able to do it. And yeah, it's incredible to hear that. I was wondering also, in my book, I have a chapter on compensation. And obviously, your two career paths are probably pretty different in monetary compensation. But I also think about compensation being anything that gives you energy to keep giving, contributing to the work that you do. And would love your thoughts on that, nothing specific, but more just how you reconciled that change in your life and what gives you energy or gives you the compensation you need to do the work you do.
Yeah. Look, there is obviously quite a bit of a difference between the two lives that I have led in terms of remuneration and that side of things. But it's, I guess, not as bad as people think it is. We live very, very good lives out here in the bush, all of our expenses. There's no outgoings for us, basically. And so it does make it a little bit easier. But in terms of that reconciliation, I guess, of making that decision to do this, it's kind of just, it's the need of me being out, being in the wilderness, working in these really pristine habitats that there's not a lot of them left, and go back to that word privilege, it feels like it's a privilege to be working in these areas, to be working for places that do so much for like conservation and giving back in that regard. And that's, I think, important, and it makes it easy to justify.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if you have thought about if you got to redo your college career and if you would make the same choices or if you would have done something different.
I guess it's a tricky one. For me, I've always been a big believer of every decision you've ever made has led you to where you are today, right? So I kind of don't think I would change anything because where I am today is where I feel like I need to be. And so it's easy to sort of look back and grass is always greener and say, oh, what if I'd got into this sooner? But at that time, it might have been a different industry. It might have been a different place that I was working, a different conservation area that I was working in. And I think those skills that I picked up along the way are actually what brought me to where I am today and what I'm doing. So I don't think I would have wanted to change anything really.
Yeah, yeah. And also you probably are never wondering if this is something you should have done because you've had the experience maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And that's quite a common thing sort of in the industry, and something that I find myself quite happy to have done it this way, is that it's an industry where a lot of young people come into it sort of just out of university, maybe not really knowing what they want to do for a career. And it is a very attractive job to come and do for a couple of years and live out in the bush and experience that. And so the industry does have a lot of younger people that join it to do it. And then they go through the process of wanting to try the 9-to-5 and see what that is like and make that move. Whereas I've kind of done it the other way around. And as you said, that clarity of I know what I'm gaining by being here, and I also know what I've given up by moving away from that.
Yeah,
and that's important.
Okay, the safari training that you mentioned, I don't know if you call it wilderness training or what do you call it?
So I guess it's just a ranger training course. So there's different people who do it, but ranger training, yeah.
Yeah. What was that like?
Interesting. When I did it through a year-long course. There are different ways of doing it. And it's a totally different set of skills that you have to pick up. Initially, a lot of the training that I did was based purely on the theory of the bush because, I didn't do a degree in any kind of environmental sciences or biology or anything like that. And so I had to pick a lot of that up. Obviously, it did help that I was naturally quite interested in it anyway. So I'd been reading a lot of books around it and everything. But there was a lot of the theory of the bush to be able to give your guests a good experience in terms of being able to interpret what is happening around you in this environment. So there was a lot of that. There was some very new aspects for me and concepts for me, things like rifle handling. Living in the UK, that had never come up. That's something that we had to do. So there's a lot of practical as well as cognitive things that I had to do that were quite different, I guess.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if this is right, but I believe you guys have to also stay out in the bush alone as part of your qualifications or certification.
Yes, absolutely.
How was that in the wild by yourself? With the lions?
For the company that I'm working for now, part of that whole training process that they go through with you is you'll spend 6.5 weeks in a training camp, and on one of those weeks, they send you out into the middle of the bush, and you don't have a tent or anything like that. You have to set up a makeshift shelter. People are spending time at the fire, overwatch, overnight, doing little shifts to stand by the fire and make sure there's no lions or leopards or anything around you. But it's a surreal kind of experience, but just something that I just loved every second of. We also spent time, one of my favorite parts of the training actually was where they sent us out for a week on our own each day. So at night we were coming back to the camp, but every day, and they would give you a route. It might be 15 odd miles that you'd have to walk every day on your own out in the bush, and you encounter all of these animals, and there's some incredible learning that comes out of it. Because for a lot of people, especially for me, that came from an office job, to suddenly be out here in the bush, to do those things and experience that for the first time. There's not a lot of things, I guess, where you can say that's a real first time experience for me.
Yeah. Oh my God, Matt, I think some of my listeners have just opted out of the possibility of becoming a guide, but what an experience to be there in nature. I mean, talk about having to be alert and fully present in what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, we refer to it as awareness, right? And the whole drive of that particular week is awareness, situation awareness of things around you. You're checking the wind, you're listening the entire time, and it's draining, not from the physical point of view in terms of the 12, 15 mile walk. That's fine. That's easy. It's draining from a mental point of view to have to listen out for these animals and be aware of them and try and spot them before they spot you and everything. So
you cannot let your guard down.
No.
No. I also am curious about your thoughts on ecotourism, and especially where you are, how having ecotourism as part of an area allows you to do the conservation that you actually care about. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's actually quite interesting for me because before I was here where I am today at And Beyond, I worked at a different camp, and they were more based on the ecotourism thing. It was, let's get people here on safari to show them the animals. And that's fine. That is a route that some places take. But where I am now, it's definitely conservation forward, which is really, really nice. It means that we feel like we're making a difference, and hopefully it feels like the guests that are coming here are also making a difference, because ultimately ecotourism is important, right? If we didn't have guests that came here wanting to see a lion, there wouldn't be any funding that would allow for these bits of land to be conserved for that. And so it is critical that the ecotourism thing is a big part of the conversation in terms of conservation. It's not the only part, but it is a huge chunk of why this industry is sustainable. So yeah, particularly where I'm at now, there's lots of different projects and everything that are happening that aren't necessarily focused on ecotourism. It's kind of a sideline thing for And Beyond, whereas other places might just focus purely on the tourist part of it.
Yeah, and I know that you guys have also research that happens on the property that you guys help support. And is that a part that's interesting to you as well, to be able to engage with different methods of conservation or on a particular species.
Absolutely. There's research that goes on that brings things from agriculture and brings them into this space, which is quite interesting. Things that are very much sort of conversational topics in other industries as well. Things like carbon capture, carbon sequestration, that kind of thing. But then also with other species like cheetah and everything, that was my personal favorite animal. So I'm always going to be happy to talk about cheetah conservation. But cheetah metapopulations, because cheetah went through this real genetic bottleneck, and there's companies now that are doing great work to make sure that is a species that is going to be around for a little while longer, which is nice. And I suppose the company being so conservation forward means that we kind of get sucked into it, which is great. It's not just a job about going out and showing guests these animals. We get to get involved with the conservation activities. And more importantly, we get to get the guests involved with those conservation activities. And so just linking back to our conversation earlier about feeding off the energy of our guests and the awe and wonder that they experience, it applies to this as well, that we get to do these amazing things with dehorning rhino and everything with our guests, which allows for the conservation to actually happen in the first place. And then also just it's a chance for me to share that magical moment with my guests.
Yeah. And then you're planting a seed in them that maybe takes their interest in conservation well beyond your game drive.
Hopefully, yes, exactly. That's the whole point, right? It's about getting guests to come back, but not just to come back to come on holiday. It's to come back and give back, which is really, really important.
Yeah. I love so many of the stories you have shared. And I wanted to get your recommendation. Like, what would you tell somebody who says, has a crazy idea for a change in career? What advice would you give somebody else? And crazy in quotes.
I think if you've got the means, if you're in the correct situation to make it work, then just give it a go, because you don't know unless you try. And I know that things could have turned out differently for my story, but if there's a chance that it can go the same way that it has for me, and I can be in the space where I'm thoroughly enjoying every day that I have to go to work, then you've got to take that chance.
Yeah, that is lovely advice. And I've just really enjoyed the conversation, and it's so different to most of the conversations I have. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your story.
No, thank you very much. It's been nice to spread the story. If it does spark a little thought process in maybe one of your listeners to make that leap, or to even just consider it and just put the what if in their mind, then I'd be happy with that.
Yeah. Well, take care. We'll be in touch.
Thank you very much, Georgie.
Now for 3 important takeaways from this conversation with Matt. His entire career trajectory shifted when a friend casually asked, "Why don't you do this full time?" during their safari holiday. The lesson? Stay open to seemingly throwaway comments from people who see you in your element. Sometimes others can spot what lights you up before we can. Also, allow yourself to experiment. Matt designed a transition plan in stages, starting with committing to 1 year of training, at which point he gave himself permission to reevaluate his options upon completion. He didn't commit to becoming a safari guide forever, just to exploring it. This trial period mindset made the leap feel doable rather than a permanent plan, reducing the psychological barrier to actually taking action. Lastly, don't underestimate your transferable skills as you experiment in seemingly unrelated paths. Matt's engineering background translated in unexpected ways, from vehicle maintenance in the bush to problem-solving mindset, and also his managerial skills helped him become head ranger. The broader lesson, you can draw learning from all your experiences, even if they seem completely different. His story shows that dramatic career pivots don't always require rejecting your past identity. Sometimes they're just the natural progression towards what you're always going to be. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Work That's Worth It. Remember, every conversation we share is designed to empower you to build a career that's truly worth your time and energy. There are future disruptors out there just like you who would appreciate the conversations in this podcast. Please support me by spreading the word and sharing this episode with a friend or two, or visit my website at georgieenthoven.com. That's spelled GeorgieNThoven.com. Until next time, ask yourself, What problems am I solving, and are they worth my valuable time? Your intentional choices today can lead to exponential impact tomorrow. Thanks for listening.